Hi everyone, myself Nokku Prithvi. In this video, I will be discussing about AWS API Gateway and its superpowers. So let's before discussing what are these things, let me tell what are the things I will cover. I will cover a detailed intro on what is API and API Gateway and its superpowers 1, 2, 3, and finally I will basically using all the above knowledge will finally create a new API from scratch using API Gateway. So let's get into the details. So what is API Gateway? First of all, what is API? So API are the mechanisms that enable two software components to communicate each other with set of definitions and protocols. For example, as here mentioned, so you can take a weather bureau software system contains daily weather data. The weather app on your phone or any, for example, any website, e-commerce website wants to to this system. The talks happens in terms of APIs and shows you daily weather updates on your phone. So basically it is used for the website, for the apps, for the communicating with other software components. That is what API is. What is AWS API Gateway? Basically AWS API Gateway is a AWS service which helps in creating these APIs and publishing them, maintaining them, and securing them, and different aspects of maintaining them. Um, Different forms of APIs like REST APIs, HTTP APIs, WebSocket APIs. Basically, it acts as an entry point for client applications to access backend services such as AWS Lambda functions. So this is the document. But it will get more clarity when I showed you the demo and its superpowers. Basically, when I discuss on superpowers. But yeah, API Gateway basically gives us a provision to create and publish these APIs, which are used for websites and apps for communicating with other software components. That is about API Gateway. Now let's get into the superpowers. So superpower one. So it allows us to easily create and deploy APIs and also test them. Okay, let's see one API which was already created. So this is the API which was I created for this purpose. So you go to API Gateway basically and service API. Go to AWS API Gateway. If you it will these are the APIs which I created previously, and this is the API which I created for this purpose. uh, Here you can see this is how it looks like. So basically to start with, this is how an API looks like. For example, a number is there. So this is how an API looks like. These APIs can be, let's say, tested from different places. I can test it from here from the browser. This is one option. So basically, the API here is providing a random number, that is its functionality. So here number three, different numbers. So in this way, basically the different apps and websites will get and will basically transfer the information with other software components as mentioned. So this is an API and this is how it looks like. Now let's see how it created. So this is the console of API Gateway. We have resources where you can create basically an API. So these are known as called as resources, and these are called as methods. So resources nothing but they will give an hierarchical view for your API. For example, in this case only, for example, create entry. You might have different functionality. So you will have create entry, and for getting a number, you will have different hierarchical structure. So so basically, if you see create resource, it nothing but creates an hierarchical structure like this slash create entry slash number, something like this. Create some slash message from the root. It will be more clear when I showed you when it create the scratch, but let's not get into that now. So create resource is resource is about that. And method is about basically different HTTP methods. So there are different methods here. If you can see, you can see get method, post method, put method, and delete method, and different methods. Basically get is used for getting the for entries. For example, if you see a e-commerce website, get method is used for getting all the users, and post is for creating new users, put is for modifying the existing user, and delete is for deleting the user. These kind of methods are being you will be used for the APIs. So yeah, this is about basically resources and methods. Now let's get back. So I showed you how a API deployed API looks like, and I showed you resource and methods, and I tested with sample input and showed you the response via browser. But we can test with another things also, like AWS console, CLI, Postman. So yeah, let's see one by one. Yeah, one thing to note here is this under this section resources, you will create this resource hierarchical structure and methods for interacting with your backend. But once it is done, once you created resource and method, and you are integrated your backend, you need to deploy it. Once it is deployed, you can deploy it to different stages like dev, stage, prod, whatever you have created, and it ultimately goes to this staging section and actually creates that API, deploys that API, so that you can use in your application. Here it's just for your mapping and for your hierarchical structure. This resource section is, but the actual for actual API you need to deploy it, and it will come under the stages. Now let's test from the console, AWS console. For example, I want to test this before deployment anything. I just since it doesn't take any input, this API, I just click test, and it will give a random number file. This is how you quickly test for from the AWS console for just for debugging purpose. This is not for API testing as such, but to show you API testing, I showed you from the browser. Now I will show you a popular API interaction tool, which is Postman. So you can install this Postman. Basically, it is free. You can download and install it. I will in this download section. I'll post in the description. But once you installed and signed in, basically you need to choose a method. For example, I create a new, and I choose to method by default it's get, but accordingly you can choose, and you need to choose the API. Since this is the API which I created, yeah, you can also see you, for example, number. So I just copy and pasted it, right? You need to go till here, number. If you click on slash number is the one, so slash number, and you can provide your input if you have any via body. So there are different forms you can provide. Generally you can provide from raw, and you can provide also headers if there is a security token or so, which I will be showing next from here. But yeah, input can be can be sent from here. Since this doesn't require any input, it express only output, means response. I will just send it. See, it's sending number 0 as in JSON format, number 7. Since it's a random generator, this API randomly generates an integer between 0 to 9, and it will be sending you as the thing. Okay, so I will show you the random generator function also for you to quickly visualize what is happening behind the screen also. So when the API is triggered, this it will come to this resource level, because this is the one which we triggered, and since we are operating on get method, it will trigger this get method. We will go to resources, and this is the get method. And if you see here, it is integrated with this lambda function. Lambda function is a compute, serverless compute, which you can run your code on it. I made a detailed video on it. I will put in the description, you can feel free to watch it. So what it is doing is it is generating a random number between 0 to 9, and sending it as a response. So this is what this simple lambda is doing, random number generator. So when user triggered it, it will invoke this lambda and give the user the response in the way uh, you are seeing the number 2 or whatever the number between 0 to 9. So this is about uh, okay, I have showed you the Postman way of testing. Yeah, you can use the CLI also for testing. This is a Ubuntu server which I will show you. So you just need to curl the API, and it will give you a random number 1, number 2. So these are the different ways to check your API. So you can basically use whatever the way you want. So this is the superpower one of API gateway. So it allows us to basically easily create via resources section, as you've seen, and deploy APIs. And also there are different integrations or can be made, and also you can easily test the API which was created. Now let's see superpower 2. So it basically the API gateway, since we are talking about API gateway superpower 2, it provides best practices for using an API. Basically it provides different authorization and authentication methods we can configure. It provides different traffic control like via rate limiting, request limiting, those kind of controls which it provides for the API. It also provides monitoring and logging for the API. So it provides these best practices for an API. So it in the sense API gateway. So let's see one by one. The task I will be showing is the API keys, and yeah, how to use API keys. Let's quickly get into it. So we will be I will be showing you the one which I have created for authentication, number with authentication. So the only change you need to make is you need to make method request, go to the integration, and here API key required will be option is there. You need to enable it, make from false to true, and save it, and you need to deploy it to make the change happen. But to create an API key and attach to this particular method, get method, under this resource, you need to follow two steps, that is creation of API keys and creation of usage plan. So you need to create an API key, sample API key. I have created an API key which is here basically which is shown here. You can show the value also, and you attach it to a usage plan. You create a usage plan, and basically it will require few things. I have created the usage plan, and usage plan is nothing but a configuration file where you can map particular API with the API key. So here this usage plan one is a configuration file, you can say, where you can map this API, random generator API or API dev stays with this API key one which we have created. So this is the user usage plan. You need to create these two things which I will be showing in few minutes, where when I created from the scratch. So this is how you need to create an usage plan and API key, and make this uh, method request is equal to API gateway key equal to true, and just deploy it. So what is the advantage, you can ask? So by doing this, our API will be secure. So previously, if you remember, I have used it from the browser and so without any authentication. But if I use it with number with auth, which is the new one which I created, and enter, it will say message forbidden. The same happens with here. If I go to here, get method, and I tried send, message forbidden. But I go to the headers, and I given my API key, which is API key which I have attached to this resource. This is the API key. I just copy it, and I need to name it as XAPI key. This is a naming convention, and pass it in the headers, this key, and send. Now you will get an answer, because in this way the API is protected via API key. Yeah, so this is the advantage of authentication, API keys and usage plans. Yeah, via usage plans you can configure different rate limits also. Yeah, but yeah, that is the another superpower basically, which important authorization authentication. But even better than this API key, there are different authorizer support which will be provided, like Lambda authorizer and Cognito authorizer, which are basically, with the help of Lambdas and Cognito service, our APIs can be secured. So we'll discuss more in maybe the next part or so, but this is another way in securing the APIs, which will be providing more security than API key usage plan. So, but the intent is securing the API. That is the intent. So this is how easily we can secure an API using API gateways. Now we'll talk about yeah, resource policy also another way of securing. You can secure the via policy. You can whitelist particular IPs. We can deny particular range of IPs. Uh, Basically, we can control who can trigger this IPs in a network configuration point of view, network point of view. The other thing is, let's say, discuss about what are the next thing, logging and monitoring options. So logging and monitoring options also are provided to your API. So you click on your API, you will get different settings. You can adjust the throttling, how much requests per second it accepts. uh, you can also enable the logging here. So these are things, you can see the deployment history. But yeah, basically I will go, no, not go into the details, but much details. But basically for the API to make, it provides more API gateway. The center, basically this AWS service provides more usability in terms of productionizing an API. You can attach also a web application firewall which allows particular IP ranges. So these are the basically what you call superpower of the API gateway provided. Superpower 3 offer developer options. So I'll just showing you, but I may not be going to the details. For example, if you go to the get, you see different method request and different modifications you can do to the input request and also to the output. Integration response is disabled, but if you see here, duration is enabled. Why? Because I have an enabled lambda proxy I have disabled. So this is basically it's good to have it in term if we are using the integration with lambda, because all the input as it is mentioned, whatever the request will be sent into the lambda. But if you want to modify your request and responses, you can disable it and you can modify it accordingly. So this is the basically the superpower 3. I mean major power, superpower 1 and 2 and 3. Basically easily create and deploy best practices and developer options. Yeah, now we discussed this more theory and I already showed a created one. But let's create on our own and see how it looks like. And for this I will be creating a new resource, new method, and I will be testing via Postman CLI. Now I will be creating API and API key and usage plan, and I will add API key as a security layer and test from Postman. So basically all the things which we have done, from all the things we have learned from these above 4 slides, I will be talking now in the practical mode. So without delay, let's get into it. So let's go to the AWS home page. Let's search for API Gateway. So if you click on APIs, if it came, then it's fine. Then it will show you all the APIs which you created. We can create an API. So there are different options: HTTP, WebSocket API, REST API. So REST APIs are basically, yeah, is generally used ones. HTTP are the recent ones which were supported recently. It is a low latency, cost effective REST APIs, but in terms of security, REST API will be more secure. So for internal communications, HTTP APIs are the good ones, but generally for the public applications or generally exposed ones, REST API will go with REST API. WebSocket APIs basically are used for persistent connections between your front end and basically back end. Um, basically, in the applications which need persistent corrections for longer duration, let's more than 30 seconds basically, because the REST API will be timed out after 30 seconds. So if you need more than 30 seconds, up to 10 minutes, this WebSocket API helps you provide that persistent connection between your client application and your backend. In this video, let's go to the REST API, which is yeah, which one is generally being used. Let's build. Let's give it a name. I will give random gen 2, random generator 2. Yeah, let's just give the same description, create an API. That's it. So now we have created an API. Under actions, I will create a resource, and I will say, let's say integer, or let's say number only, number more than 10, let's say. And let's say create resource. It will create a resource for us. Under this, I will say I will create a method. I'll have different options, but I want to get a number more than 10, so I will get option and I will select it. And now it will ask different options. So there are different integrations which you can make. So you can integrate with this API with your backend services like Lambda or any other AWS service. uh, these are the services offered. There are wide range: S3, SQS, SNS, and HTTP endpoints also you can map. As of now, I'm mapping to the Lambda function, which is the most used option. And you can use this Lambda proxy, enable it, because it will help you to send the entire request which is being made directly to the Lambda. Here request will be proxy to Lambda with request details available in the event. So all the, so if you link with your requesting from using from your application, I mean front end, the all complete request will be sent to the Lambda itself, and you can modify within the Lambda. And Lambda function, I will be keeping the one which I have generated, which I have created previously. I'm just saving it, and I'm saying asking it, it is saying API gateway permission to invoke Lambda function. That is fine. I said okay. Now the integration is created. Now let's test it. More than 10, I am saying I'll just 10 test, but it is giving random number 4 since I haven't modified the code. So let's say here from 10 to, let's say 20, control S and deploy. So again, the creation of this Lambda and details of this Lambda uh, discussed in another video. Please check that. So now let's again test it. Now see, the number is about 10. So all the random numbers now are about 10, all the requests, and you can see the latency details also. Now let's create an API. For that, you need to deploy an API. It will ask, for the first time it will ask stages. So again, the advantage of API gateway is you can deploy to multiple stages, dev, and also I can deploy to prod, right? And I can deploy to prod. I can create new stages basically. Let's say prod, and you generally you can have a different environments to be testing under the same API, for the same API, I mean, and you can basically test it and use this dev endpoints, sorry, dev APIs for dev environment and prod environment, prod APIs for prod environment. Okay, nevertheless, we have created an API. Let's test it from our Postman. I'll create a new one, paste it, and send the request, and see the random number it is generating. This is how easily you can create an API using API gateway. Now let's test with make it a little more secure it. So as I mentioned previously, you need to go to method request and key enable this true. and you need to go to API keys. Let's create a new API key. I will say random gen 2 something, and it will generate an API key for you. You can see this API key also. Now you need to get back to APIs, and random gen 2 is the one which we have created. And now we need to create an usage plan. uh, let's say random gen 2 usage plan something, right? And you can have enable the throttling also, means you can restrict the request per second for this API via usage plan. It's basically a configuration file. Now we can add a stage API stages. We can say I want this stage save, which I have created now, random gen 2 and dev stage, to be associated with next to be associated with this API key, which is random gen 2, this API key which I have created. Done. You can also change it once it is created usage plan. You can change it also from here. You can add new keys and stuff. These are things are editable. Now let's get back into our random generator 2 API which we have created now, and let's since I think we have modified, we need to check whether we have modified this API gateway API key required true. Yes, we modified. And let's deploy to dev stage only, and say description like auth API authorization added something, right? Some description which you can take. Now if you send request to the same API, it will say message forbidden. Again you go to API and you copy the key, and you need to type X API key, and you need to have its value and send. Sorry, this is not, you can send via parameters also, but the good idea is to send via headers. I will remove this parameters. It's better to send from headers, and when I send it, it will give number more than 10 basically. So more than 10, which is a new API which we created, will be giving you. This is how we create an API gateway from scratch. So the other important feature of it is authorizer, which I will be discussing in next. But this is an idea about API gateway. So to recap it, we discussed what is API and API gateway, what is the superpower, and we saw already created API, and we saw different features of it, and also we saw different authorization process like API key and different stuff, and different developer options. Finally, with all the learnings we have done, we created ourselves a new API from scratch, using normally, and also using API keys, and also tested from Postman and CLI. Yeah, thanks for watching the video, and yeah.